Our Western world has achieved amazing results on the material and technical levels. For instance, just to give a few examples, it has raised hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in a very few generations. In many, if not most countries, schooling levels reach close to 100%. Medicine has reached unbelievable heights. Life expectancy in a few generations has gone up more than it took many, many centuries in the years before. You could travel practically to any part of the planet in about 2 days today, and especially communications have developed in an extraordinary manner. With internet and the portable telephone, it's just stunning. Anybody who has a good internet contact can, just by taking your phone out of your pocket. And I was born just shortly before the last World War, and I have seen this happen in front of my eyes, so to speak. But there are also huge disparities. The disparities in wealth are just stunning. Depending on the sources you consider, a handful of ultra-billionaires, I've seen figures between 5 and 25 mentioned. It doesn't make any difference at that level. These people, this group of ultra-billionaires, have a wealth equivalent to that of half the planet. A few ultra-billionaires have more than well over 8.5 billion people. That is almost obscene. The environment has been attacked in an amazing manner. The United Nations just published recently what are called 6 tipping points for the environment. And if you want to have more information on these tipping points, you just type tipping points, United Nations research on your internet, and you'll get there straight away. These are 6 areas where we have already overstepped serious tipping points. For instance, the levels of animal extinction. There's a certain rate, natural rate of animal extinction, which has gone on for hundreds of thousands of years. And now we have reached that we are at 10 times the level of the natural rate of extinction, which could have dramatic ecological results. Another example is that of melting glaciers, which produce a great deal of water for the planet. There is in our countries a constant increase in mental diseases, mental disorders, people feeling depressed, and psychiatrists are overwhelmed by the number of patients. That is something, it's a sign, a very disturbing sign, that something is not functioning in our society. consumer society continues consuming at an alarming and disturbing rate. If you speak of simple living, it is almost a joke for probably most people in our Western societies, and yet we just cannot continue consuming at this rate because it will be the annihilation of our society. But neither the governments, and still less the large economic groups, even want to face this factor. And I could continue this list of what is dysfunctioning in our societies for a long moment. I've given just a few examples, and I'm sure everyone has their own pet examples. So what is the missing element? And for me, the missing element is the spiritual dimension. And when I speak of spiritual dimension, I do not mean religious. In my latest book, just appeared in the United States, The Gentle Art of Spiritual Discernment, How to Find Your Personal Path, I make a very clear distinction between religion and spirituality. Religion is still a form of organized beliefs which for millennia has been mainly run by men. I'd like to stress this. And it is very formal, and it has been very helpful for many people, but it has also its very harmful aspects. And one of them is, teaching people how they should think and what they should believe, instead of encouraging them to find their own spiritual path. Spirituality, on the other hand, is, as I see it, authentic spirituality is a search, a personal search. It can also be a group search for meaning in your life. For meaning, and I have written a good many examples. One is the practice of blessing, which has helped thousands of people all around the world, and I really mean thousands. I published a good many years ago a book called The Gentle Art of Blessing, which was based on a very powerful experience I had many, many years ago. It was over 30 years ago, when I was studying in a quiet place. I suddenly received a gust of inspiration, and I was literally like a scribe under orders. And I took, under dictation from some source at a higher level, which I believe was divine, the following text, and I'd like to read it because it has inspired people all around the world for many, many, many years. On awakening, bless this day, for it is already full of unseen good. which your blessings will call forth. For to bless is to acknowledge the unlimited good that is embedded in the texture of the universe and awaiting each and all. On passing people in the street, on the bus, in places of work and play, bless them. The peace of your blessing will accompany them on their way, and its aura will be a light on their path. On meeting people and talking to them, bless them in their health, their work, their joy, their relationship to the universe, themselves, and others. Bless them in their abundance and their finances. Bless them in every conceivable way. For such blessings not only sow seeds of healing, but one day will spring forth as flowers in the waste places of your own life. As you walk, bless the city in which you live, its government and teachers, its nurses and street sweepers, its children and bankers, its priests and prostitutes. The minute anyone expresses the least aggression or unkindness to you, respond with a blessing. Bless them totally, sincerely, joyfully. For such blessings are a shield that protects them from the ignorance of their misdeed and deflects the arrow that was aimed at you. To bless means to wish unconditionally and from the deepest chamber of your heart, unrestricted good for others and events. It means to hallow, to hold in reverence, to behold with awe that which is always a gift from the Creator. He who is hallowed by your blessing is set aside, consecrated, holy, whole. To bless is to invoke divine care upon, to speak or think gratefully for, to confer happiness upon, although we ourselves are never the bestower, but simply the joyful witnesses of life's abundance. To bless all without distinction is the ultimate form of giving, because those you bless will never know from whence came the sudden ray that burst through the clouds of their skies, and you will already be a witness to the sunlight in their lives. When something goes completely askew in your day, when some unexpected event upsets your plans and upsets you, burst into blessing. For life is teaching you a lesson, and the very event you believe to be unwanted, you yourself called forth, so as to learn the lesson you might balk against were you not to bless it. Trials are blessings in disguise, and hosts of angels follow in their path. To bless is to acknowledge the omnipresent universal beauty hidden from material eyes. It is to activate the law of attraction, which, from the furthest reaches of the universe, will bring into your life exactly what you need to experience and enjoy. When you pass a prison, mentally bless its inmates in their innocence and freedom, their gentleness, pure essence, and unconditional forgiveness. One can only be a prisoner of one's self-image, and a free man can walk unshackled in jail, just as citizens of a free country may be prisoners of the fear lurking within their thoughts. When you pass a hospital, Bless its patients in their presence, wholeness, for even in their suffering, their wholeness awaits discovery within them. When your eyes behold a man in tears or seemingly broken by life, bless him in his vitality and joy, for the material senses present but the inverted image of the ultimate splendor and perfection that only the inner eye beholds. It is impossible to bless and judge at the same time. So hold constantly as a deep, hallowed, intoned thought the desire to bless. For truly, then shall you become a peacemaker, and one day you shall behold everywhere the very face of God. Postscriptum. And of course, above all, do not forget to bless the utterly beautiful person you are. And I started sharing this text. I typed it on a page and started sharing it in my very widespread correspondence with people in different countries. And I started having amazing results. Let me read just one response I received from a gentleman in Mamudu, a man who became later a dear friend of mine, who works at the grassroots with farmers in the Mopti region of Mali in West Africa. He shared his experience in a moving letter. I have started to turn blessing into an everyday experience in all situations. It has become part of my very marrow, and each day it fills me with more and more. It has started to sharpen my sense of sharing, of justice, of equity, and solidarity. I am becoming more patient, tolerant, forbearing, understanding, and sensitive to everything that affects my neighbor. To begin with, I did not understand, because it was at the same time very difficult and very easy to forgive someone who had deliberately harmed me. Then I understood that I only need to master my heart. This means that all depends on the state of mind we have towards things. May Allah, who is supreme wisdom, grant us a loving state of mind. I thank you sincerely. May Allah reward you when I bless someone who is suffering physically, morally, or materially. I am filled with the comforting breath which does me good and makes me strong and serene. I have distributed your text all around me and even far off. And I received so many responses of this kind. And this is what I would call this new spirituality, which comes from the heart and which people individually can create from their own experience. I give more examples of this type in my latest book, which was published a few months ago in the United States, The Gentle Art of Spiritual Discernment, Discovering, a Guide to Discovering Your Personal Path. When I discovered blessing, I was so enthusiastic. I don't have a car, so I traveled a lot by train. And I used to walk the whole length of the train, both ways, to be sure I blessed every person on that train. And I started having interesting experience, Stu, with a Cameroonian friend, we were organizing a benefit concert in a large college, high school in Geneva, which had a very large auditorium. And the caretaker of the school was very aggressive. He was told by the director to help us organize this, but he wasn't at all cooperative. And we discussed with him the mics we needed, and I came 2 hours in advance with my Cameroonian friend who had an orchestra and singers, and there were hardly any mics left on the scene. And we couldn't function like that. And we went to the caretaker. He was behind a counter. We were the other side. And he was so aggressive. And I felt anger starting to boil in my tummy. And my little voice said, "Pierre, you're not going to solve this by being angry. Bless him." And I started blessing him. And suddenly, the most wonderful smile appeared on his face. He went to his laboratory, brought us a whole series of mics, recommended the best ones, and we had a wonderful evening. And I've received so many letters from all around the world of people expressing this power. So let's come back to the organization of Western society, which has been a huge material success, but a very great spiritual failure. Because what is missing in this society is the spiritual dimension. And when I say spirituality, I repeat, I do not mean religion. I mean a form of spirituality that you may share with other people, but it also may be strictly personal and individual, and you practice it without necessarily belonging to any group. I personally don't belong to any religion or religious organization. It's not any kind of spirituality that I would like to promote, but a spirituality based on love, because I think love is the fundamental law of the universe. I had a very powerful mystical experience well over 30 years ago. I was in Africa for the meeting of what was at the time the largest grassroots peasant organization in Africa, l'Association Internationale CISES, which I was one of the founding members. And the last day I caught dysentery. At the beginning it's not too serious, but it can become serious if you don't take care of it. And I worked, at that time I followed a spiritual path of spiritual healing. I worked with my mantras and spiritual texts, and it seemed that the problem had disappeared. But the next day, as I went to the airport, it started all over again. And on the plane, I was working with my spiritual text, my affirmations, and all the rest. And I was sitting next to a young, unaccompanied boy. He must have been about 8, 9, or 10. And the stewardess taking care of him was so kind. She constantly came to see if he was okay, if he didn't need anything, as if she had been his mother. And I felt suddenly such a gratitude for this woman. And it became a universal gratitude. And suddenly, I had an out-of-body experience. I was no longer in the plane, but in a space where there was only the feeling of love. Love was the only law, the only power, the only presence, the only direction, the only substance, the basic reality of the universe in which we live. It was so powerful. I don't know how long it lasted. The most wonderful thing is Pierre Pradervand had completely disappeared. I had no consciousness of being this little Swiss gentleman with his red Swiss passport. I was just receiving this inflow of love and understanding the power of love. And suddenly I came back. I was in my seat in the plane. In a matter of seconds, the dysentery disappeared completely. But above all, I had made what has been the major, most important spiritual experience in my whole life. Because I do believe that the basic law of the universe is love. I believe this is the greatest need of the world today also. We need more love in all we do. That is the essence, for me, of authentic spirituality. In my latest book, I also speak of, again, this is the latest one, the key qualities of a spiritual seeker. And for me, I'd like to mention them because it seems to me that is something important. The first one, I would say, is sincerity. Mary Baker Eddy, who is an American thinker, writer, who created her own form of spirituality in the 19th century, she published a book that is rather amazing, because the last 100 pages of the book are just stories of healing, of people healed just by reading the book. And I don't know of any other book in the world which can carry the proof of what it's saying in its own writing. And she said, a deep sincerity is sure of success, for God takes care of it. And I often repeat this statement to myself. I don't think you can travel on the spiritual path if you don't have great spiritual perseverance, because the spiritual path is not a highway with 5 different lanes. The spiritual path is more like a mountain trail. It needs perseverance, strength, endurance, trust, etc. Openness and receptivity are another quality of the spiritual traveler. Cultivating silence is also especially important in this world where we are constantly assailed by noises, advertising, pictures, images, whatever. We live in a world of constant distraction. And we need to rediscover the power of silence. I read almost daily books by an American spiritual mystic of the last century, Joel Goldsmith. He created his own teaching called The Infinite Way, The Infinite Way by Joel Goldsmith. And at one time in his career, he was receiving well over 100 calls for healing. He was a healer per day. And most of the calls were healed, and some instantaneously. And he tells of an instance when he had his agenda, he noted all the appointments for the day, and one day he arrived at noontime. He looked at his agenda, and for the first time ever, it had never happened, he had not received. He did not have a single appointment between 12 and 1 o'clock. And in the present evening and the morning, he'd received 35 different calls for help. And he turned to God and he said, he was sure that God had organized this for him to discover something. He asked God, what am I supposed to do with this hour? And he was told just to plunge into silence. And so he just stayed in this silence, just listening. And he came out at 1 o'clock, and in the following hours, nearly every single person who'd asked for healing reported they'd been healed, and he had not worked for them. And he taught me something so important about prayer, that prayer is not asking a father figure to do something for us. It is listening to what the Great Spirit has to tell us. And I was so moved by this passage that I said, I wish to really experience this quality of silence he experienced. And my desire was totally sincere, totally intense. And I made the silence inside me with this clear intention. And I had another mystical experience. I've had 3 in my life. Suddenly I was in a space of total harmony, perfection, beauty, wonderful colors. I would say, between quotes, heaven. I was in a space of absolute perfection and harmony and peace. And I don't know how long it lasted, but I came out of it, and it has remained with me, as this is our destination, that of every human being. And something very interesting about Joel Goldsmith is, and this is stunning, he says when he received a call for healing, the first thing he did was forget the name of the person who called him and forget the problem for which they asked him for help. That is so stunning. But when you understand Joel's concept of prayer, that it is not asking for something of a father figure who is given everything in advance, but it's learning to receive the abundance that is already awaiting each and every one of us. Now, I think the spiritual path is a path of great mental discipline. Blessing can help you a great deal, because we live in a world where we are being constantly pulled out of ourselves, if I can say, by advertising, by radio, television, noises, whatever. Whereas the spiritual path is always going into yourself, into the silence, into the listening. So it's the opposite of the kind of society we live in. And of course, this can only be reached by great mental discipline. And one of the most helpful thoughts I have come across is bringing every single thought captive unto love. That is one of the two basic principles by which I try to live my spiritual path. I'm still a beginner. I'm still in the first or second level of grade school, of the tiny tots. But this power of love is amazing. I had some time ago, I guess a couple of years ago, it was just when the Ukraine war started. I was in my quiet moment, which I have every morning, at least an hour, and I was listening, and I received an order: love Putin. Now, he's not one of the people I would have thought of loving specially. But for 2 weeks, I worked on learning to love him. And I can really say, after 2 weeks, I loved this man. I even wrote a blog on this, and never received as many positive responses to a blog. And still today, I pray. When I say I pray, I am in spiritual thought. I send him thoughts of love every day. And I call him Vladimir, not Mr. President, because I really feel a bond of brotherhood. Now, people will say, oh, this Pradervand guy is completely crazy. But spiritual level is on a complete different level than the rational, mental, intellectual level. And for me, it is perfect. And another part of very important aspect of the spiritual path is staying with the presence, trying to be present to the presence every moment. Muji, who is well respected and very beloved spiritual teacher today, he says, stay only with the sense of the presence. And one of the great spiritual books of the Western spiritual Christian literature is called The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence and he reached amazing levels of spirituality. You can buy his little book, The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, which was one of the big spiritual books in my life. And he became highly respected. Simply, he had major figures of his time who came to visit him, simply because he practiced this presence in a way that was extremely living, alive. Byron Katie, who is, I don't know if she's still alive, she was a major figure in the United States at the end of the last century, early this century, in the field of personal development. A beautiful person. I once followed a workshop with her. Really amazing. She said the number one problem of the world today is confusion. And I so agree with her. We live in a world of incredible confusion. Take the COVID thing. You have high-level MDs with totally different opinions about whether you should be vaccinated or not. And that's just one example. There would be hundreds and hundreds. And a love-based spirituality is the best tool against confusion. And the other one I would like to stress, very important, is that a true spirituality is a spirituality of service. If your spirituality does not lead you to service, I would not attach great value to it. I'm thinking of two women I know. The first one is my own wife, Ellie. She's an amazing person. She created a foundation over 30 years ago, which has achieved amazing things. She works without any pay for over 30 years. And one of the things that the foundation has done is create a prize for rural peasant women. There is probably not another class of people on the planet as highly despised or just not considered as the rural women of the third world. And she created this prize over 30 years ago. It's been given to hundreds of peasant women in, I think, over 100 countries. And it has brought these women out of total anonymity for major things they achieved at a grassroots level. And especially, it has taught people to have a greater respect for this quality of women who, after all, are producing our food. And another woman I know is Marianne Sebastien. She's a Swiss lady who founded an organization called Free Voices. She regularly went to Bolivia, and once she wasn't sleeping, she got up and walked in the street. The young urchin came to her and took her by the hand, and he took her to an underground tunnel where dozens of young boys were piled one against each other just to keep a little warm. And she was so shocked by this that she was a professional singer, not anyone involved in the development, and she started an organization which has had a huge success in Bolivia. She's received all the prizes probably that country can give to people, and she's now spreading to other countries in the world. And she does this, that is her form of spirituality. For them, both women, I know both of them well, spirituality is service. Spirituality is not something you live in the comfort and warmth of your little apartment. Spirituality is going into the world and healing. and healing can take many, many forms.